Hello, my viewers. You know what they say. Some things in life are bad. They can really make you mad. Other films just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle. And these films will help things turn out for the best. While the road to hell is paved with good intentions and ineptitude, the road to heaven is paved with good actions. When all of the craft, persistence, and training that you've acquired and excelled at over the course of your own life has all paid off in this one singular project, you will get the critical acclaim that you so desperately deserve. But when all the expectations are exceeded, when you put your performance from 10 all the way to 100, that film might as well join the halls of movie Valhalla, the golden walls of cinematic heaven. It's also the place where filmmakers go after they've redeemed themselves while being punished in cinematic purgatory. For today's video, it's time to turn those frowns upside down, as we are here to discuss my personal picks for the top 10 best movies of 2024. Same rules apply just as it did to the worst list. I have not seen every single movie under the sun, but as for the ones that lit my soul in a way that it hasn't in months, with its humble, inspirational, and meticulous filmmaking, these brilliant pieces of cinema are the ones that have made the cut. Some of the following films could count as a 2023 or a 2025 film, but since they had a limited release in the United States in 2024, or didn't quite make the release up until January of 2024 on Netflix, these kind of films would count as 2024 films, so take it as dealer's choice. Without further delay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this over with. It's time to discuss the films who we should consider to be one of the gods. It's time to discover what it takes to become the best of the best. This kind of came out of nowhere for me. I've never seen Adam Elliott's work before. I've never seen Mary and Max, and this one just really took me off guard. This is one of the very few R-rated animated films that I have personally seen, and it's probably one of the best. Memoir of a Snail is an adult tragic comedy that serves as a thought-provoking inside look about the effects of depression, loneliness, company dependency, hoarding, and delivers on a remarkable message about overcoming your demons and looking forward to the future on how to improve yourself. It's all wrapped in a story about two twins who lose their parents and are being forced to live with separate foster families. And just by looking at the practical opening credits crawl and the stop motion of the characters, everything about Elliott's particular style of animation all comes to life in a bittersweet, somber way. Would I ever watch this movie again? I'm not sure. Probably not. Though it may get repetitive at times, it's still a remarkable achievement in animation that should be seen at least once. Many of us know Christopher Reeve as the man who convinced everyone that man can fly. But many of us don't know what he was like behind the curtains and what he was like out of the Hollywood industry. Told in a non-linear order, Superman tells us about what Christopher Reeve's life was really like. How influential of a father he was to his youth, what he was like as a child, up until he became an actor and achieved the role of a lifetime, which was even a role that his own father frowned upon, showing us his personal battle with paralysis after a horse riding accident. And even that didn't stop him when he became a director of his own, making a handful of films, or an activist for the disabled and dedicating his efforts to helping those with spinal or movement disabilities. Much like the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, doesn't just go out of its way to worship the kind of person that Christopher Reeves was. It's a film that admires his courageousness on the battles that were stacked against him, and what he personally meant to other individuals, such as the late Robin Williams. Whether or not you're a comic book fan, seeing Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, is a sight to behold. And while the first two films made us feel lighthearted and bittersweet, these next two are pretty, shall we say, grim. Long how the horror genre returned to where it once originated, to the oeuvre of gothic horror stories and eerie Victorian folk legends. One of the most iconic tales of our time was Bram Stoker's Dracula. Though not the first narrative written about vampires, even such legends date back to the early 17th century of this monster who roams the night to feast on human blood. It was the one that popularized the mythical creature and gave birth to one of Hollywood's most iconic villains. The original Nosferatu in 1922 was an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's work. Despite the altered narrative decisions, Bram Stoker's wife sued the filmmakers for a copyright violation, which led to the courts ordering that the prince to be decimated entirely. The film was going to be lost in history forever. And that wasn't until people found lost footage and prints that somehow managed to survive. The film was unable to die, and the legend still lives on in Robert Eggers' modern remake. Robert Eggers has, over time, become one of my favorite modern filmmakers working today. After witnessing the terrific Lighthouse and The Northman, which was just a straight-up masterpiece, his remake of the 1922 original may not be as tremendous as the former, but it's still a fabulous, horrifying picture nonetheless. The attention to detail of the Gothic production design and the Victorian-era costume design, the stellar performances, the spine-chilling cinematography, enriching dialogue, the unsettling atmosphere that fills your heart with dread, all the while telling a nefarious, eerie story about love and sacrifice. It has all the boxes checked for a horrifying, terrifying experience. It is your duty to watch this phenomenon of horror. Yeah, I told you it was gonna get grim. Don't pretend I didn't warn you. Make no mistake, Nosferatu is a near masterwork of Victorian horror. But there is just something about Longlegs that just keeps me going back for more. There's just something about it that makes me feel paralyzed just even thinking about it. Even as I left the movie theater, just even thinking about the remarkable plot twists and its inspired third act, its wicked horror crime screenplay about a detective on the search for a serial killer dealing with the arts of the occult and Satanism, the shadowy, oppressive atmosphere of an Oregon county, and the performances from Micah Monroe and Nicolas Cage as Longlegs himself made me nearly devastated. Some might say it's just Nick Cage acting as Nick Cage and makeup on, and that's mainly because of the meta. But when you melt down the bells and whistles, it's a performance that makes you feel physically uncomfortable and anxious while watching it. It's like a spider crawling up your shoulder, and you have no idea if it's going to keep staring at you or attack you. Setting itself as the highest grossing independent horror film in the last 10 years, Longlegs is a nightmare to hell you might never wake up from. Well then, now that I've finished creeping you out, let's get back to the heavenly material. The musical biopic subgenre is descending ever so closer to becoming a walking cliche of its own, offering nothing new, nor could it ever enrapture and captivate us to connect to an iconic legend or character in music, and plays everything way too safe as the star of the show plays one of the greatest hits as the crowd watches in silence and in awe, rather than exploring the context of why those songs work to begin with, or how the songs themselves could play into the story. However, Better Man is the near-perfect musical classic of the subgenre, offering us the unbelievable journey of a coked-up Caesar, one of the most influential pop stars of the United Kingdom, that being the irresistible, rebellious Robbie Williams. From Michael Gracie, a man who directed The Greatest Showman, which I heard wasn't good at all, he deserves his roses for what he has created. All told from the gimmicky perspective of Robbie being portrayed as an ape, it's one that works on a metaphorical and narrative level on how Robbie viewed and compared himself to other people and what he felt like under the spotlight by certain band members and certain agents. And the film goes out of its way to not only treat Robbie as an icon of music, like any other regular biopic, but as an actual character. The editing, dance choreography, and musical sequences are executed with so much imagination that they dismantle the likes of A Complete Unknown and Wicked combined. The performances are terrific, especially from the dynamic duo of Yano Davies and the brilliant Robbie Williams as the star of the show himself. And the ending, how can you not get goosebumps? It's a shame that this movie bombed so hard at the box office, but if you have the time, go and do yourself a favor and watch it. As one of the very few biopics that actually innovates the subgenre rather than stagnate it, Better Man is better than sex. Never heard of this movie? Well, you're in good company, because neither did anybody else when Warner Brothers decided to release Clint Eastwood's Juror No. 2 on a minuscule theatrical run before releasing it straight to streaming services. Even after an uproar from audiences trying to get this movie into more theaters nationwide, it still wasn't enough to get this film the recognition it truly deserves. It's a psychological investigation courtroom drama about a soon-to-be family man who winds up being picked to be a jury member to take part in a manslaughter case that he committed and nobody knows about, and the primary defendant didn't. Racked with guilt and worrying about his own potential fate, he tries all he can to make sure that the defendant is free and that he gets away with the crime. Drawing much inspiration to superb, well-written courtroom and police dramas, while painting on his own original ideas on the canvas, it's smart and suspenseful in every level, that as the film keeps going forward, the stakes keep rising higher and higher until it peaks with its resolution, and then you start to realize that things are about to get a whole lot worse. Much like Nosferatu, Nicholas Holt's performance is out of this planet spectacular, and that goes double for Toni Collette and supporting roles like J.K. Simmons. If this is Clint Eastwood's final film after Cry Macho and The Mule failed expectations, then Juror number 2 would be quite the note to end on. Never take a number 2 while watching Juror number 2. DreamWorks has hit the jackpot yet again with another animated classic, sending a clear message that it's their turn to bring families together and that Disney has some catching up to do. Despite the fact that I hesitate even calling this the best DreamWorks movie of all time, because 1, I don't have recency bias, and 2, there are plenty of DreamWorks animated movies much better than this, the film is still excellent on its own terms. Based on Peter Brown's beloved middle grade novel about a shipwrecked robot stranded on an island surrounded by animals, Chris Sanders' common motif of family and themes of belonging in a world that views you as an outsider are a perfect match in an adaptation that provides one of the strongest metaphors about parenting that I have seen in a DreamWorks family film. There are plenty of things to immerse yourself while watching it. The animation and imagery used in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish and inspired by Disney's golden era days, combining 3 dimensions, 2D hand-drawn, and watercolor techniques. The voice acting is simply terrific and endearing, and I cannot express how phenomenal the messaging is and how heart-pounding the musical score is. The Wild Robot is not DreamWorks' best animated movie out there, but I'd still happily state that it is one of the greats. In my Worst Set video, I explained how poorly the American Society of Magical Negroes executed itself as a satire, let alone a comedy. Little did I know in 2024, a different man showed up and said, "Back off, Jack. This is how it's done." A Different Man is an apologetically hilarious black tragic comedy that showcases itself as a satire about the casting of actors with facial deformities, societal expectations, and what it means to be beautiful inside and out. It's a story about a struggling actor named Edward, who is played in this movie by Sebastian Stan, who in this film has neurofibromatosis, who wants to avoid a life of abnormality and cruelty, and so he decides to get a treatment at a medical off-the-books program to cure his condition. The cure actually works, and once he starts living a double life and finally gets all that he's ever wanted, the film throws everything back at his face once our good golly friend Oswald arrives. And it only gets worse for Edward from here. Perhaps my favorite screenplay of the year, it's a film that meticulously balances the humorous absurdity of its premise and molds it into something with wit and soul-stirring social commentary. Why this film isn't out on Blu-ray yet, I have no freaking idea, but when that time comes, you have to do whatever it takes to buy it and watch it, because man, this film's good. And speaking of movies that should be on Blu-ray, before being traumatized by Rebel Moon Part 2 and before being betrayed by Arcane Season 2, there was a film that came out in the first week of January. J.A. Bayona's Society of the Snow. One of the greatest flicks that have ever been made about a tragedy this decade. Wait a minute, J.A. Bayona? The same director who made Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom in one of the greatest movies of the past decade, A Monster Calls? Who would have thunk? Guess you can say that this was quite the redemption after Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Without spouting too much exposition, this is a film about the miracle of the Andes. Whereas a Uruguayan rugby team of a religious school, along with 40 other passengers, collide into a snowy mountain, and with both halves of the plane separated from each other, it is up to them to reach out for help to see if there's anybody out there in the outside world, while trying with whatever limited resources and food supplies that they have to survive the ferocious, cold terrain of the Andes. I knew Bayona had experiences with the disaster subgenre with 2012's The Impossible, but I never thought that with this much research and dedication and tireless writing, when jotting down every single character, element, and quote accurately, especially after capturing 100+ hours worth of interview footage with the survivors, that it would all pay off in one of the finest foreign films ever distributed by Netflix. For a film with such innumerable characters, it's hard not to have any level of sympathy for any of these survivors. You understand what they're psychologically going through, how each of them has to cooperate in order to survive, or why they hold such an ideology. Though the actors are not familiar, each one of them gives their A game, and the dialogue is some of the best that this year has to offer. The practical effects and the execution of the plane crash is terrifying, and the production design makes you believe that you are stranded with these passengers that are trying to do whatever they can to survive and to stay warm. Society of the Snow is one for the ages and a bona fide masterwork from the Monster Calls maestro himself. And it would have been my ultimate pick for 2024 if it weren't for one film that came 2 months later. Would you look at that? My best and worst movie of the year all happen to have part 2 in their title. Joking aside, I've always had a knack for Denis Villeneuve's visually arresting, hypnotic, and artistic filmmaking and direction in a bunch of his works such as Prisoners, Blade Runner 2049, and Arrival. But Dune Part 2 is unlike anything I've ever seen from him. After waiting with such feverish anticipation after being delayed by the Screen Actors Guild strike, we were granted from the movie gods the epitome of modern science fiction majesty. For as much as I love Blade Runner 2049, this magnificent masterwork of the highest order might just be on par with it. It is such a flawless magnum opus that manages to make a almost 3-hour-long epic feel like a fast breeze. After watching that movie for the first time, I don't know how anyone could find that movie boring or overrated. I never thought I'd say this, but if you're one of those people, good luck calling other films good. Because this is the best science fiction storytelling in the 2020s can get. The costume design, nothing short of gorgeous and carefully detailed. The visual effects and production design, jaw-dropping in every single sense and definition of the word. The cinematography, it makes the eyes salivate. Hans Zimmer's score, utterly sublime. And don't even get me started on the performances. Everyone in this film is good, especially the weakest of the group, that being Dave Bautista. Will there be another science fiction picture like this? I don't know. It's a miracle that part 1 was as successful as it was, because if the opposite were to happen, we might not even get the spellbinding, breathtaking glory of part 2. Part 3 is underway, and I cannot wait to see what Denis Villeneuve has up his sleeves next. Part 2 is one of the greatest science fiction films ever made, and one of the greatest sequels of all time, and I defy you to tell me otherwise. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap. Thank you for witnessing my video of the top 10 best films of 2024. And now that we march into the new year of 2025, or we're already in 2025, may we pray and hope that Hollywood learns from its mistakes, and may we finally get more movies that will end up in the top 10 best lists of 2025. Until we meet again, my name is Luke Nukem, and you, my friends, have been blown away.